So in the last lesson, we talked about the drag link, the tie rod, the drop pitman arm, all that stuff at the front of the Bronco. So in this lesson, we're going to continue working through the steering. Now, I'm going to start with the steering wheel, and this isn't really a part of the steering troubleshooting checklist that you guys can download at the bottom of this lesson, but this is a good thing to check if your steering is ever just kind of off and it feels like, you know, maybe you can turn one way more than you can turn the other way. Most likely what's happening is your pitman arm isn't in alignment with your steering box. So how to check that is you just want to pull your pitman arm off, or pull your drag link off from your pitman arm underneath the front of the Bronco. Then what you're going to do is you're going to turn your steering wheel all the way in one direction. And then what I like to do is mark and put a piece of tape right at the top of the steering wheel when it's turned all the way at that direction. And then what you're going to do is you're going to turn it all the way back so that it locks out on the other side, and you're going to put another piece of tape there. And then what you're going to do is figure out how many turns of your steering wheel it takes to go from one side to the other, and then divide that number by 2, and that's the center of your turning radius. But then you're going to find the center between the two pieces of tape. And you know, it's kind of a rudimentary way of doing this, but it really helps to straighten your drag link and your pitman arm under the steering box so that you have full steering capabilities both ways. So you're just not off a little bit to where your steering doesn't steer all the way one way and it steers too far the other way. And once you've done that and you know that your drag link and your pitman arm is locked in right at the center of your steering box, then what I like to do is go ahead and pull off your steering wheel, straighten it, and put it back on in that position so you know it's perfectly straight, and when you're driving straight, then it stays in that place. You know, I go to a lot of different alignment shops, and some alignment shops do this, but some don't do it. And what I've noticed is sometimes an alignment shop will just straighten your steering wheel inside the cab and then line up the drag link with where the steering wheel is straight inside the cab. So this is a great way, you know, just to, if you're going to an alignment shop, do this before, and so that way your steering wheel will be straight and it'll be locked in with the center of your steering box. Number 8, get an alignment spec sheet done. Now you could go to just about any tire shop and they should be able to print one of these out for you. It's super helpful to look at your camber, your caster, your toe, and all that stuff. Now most alignment shops will be able to adjust your toe, so that's not something that you have to worry about trying to do at home. If you're going to get one of these sheets printed out, go ahead and have them adjust your toe. The thing that you do want to look at with this sheet is your caster angle. So your caster is basically where your tire is contacting the ground. Is it in front of the tire, which gives you positive caster, or is it behind the tire towards the rear of the vehicle, which gives you negative caster? Now on these Broncos, the caster angle is recommended at positive 4 degrees up to positive 9 degrees. And what this does is when you're driving straight down the road, it helps pull the tires back into alignment. So it's a super important part. But that brings us to number 9. If your caster angle is below 4 degrees, if it's below positive 4 degrees, one of the things that you want to look at is getting a new C bushing kit. These bushing sets get the caster angle higher. They come in 2 degree, 4 degree, and 7 degree sets. Now this was one of the first videos that I did on my Bronco, was I put a 14-piece bushing kit on this because my steering was all over the place. Now I'll put a link to that video down below for your viewing pleasure, but it's not required for this lesson. But basically what that C bushing does is it gives you that positive caster. Now all the vendors have them. Now with a 2.5 inch lift and a 1 inch body lift, I put the 7 degree C bushings on my Bronco. You don't have to go this much, but when I originally had my C bushings on there, my caster was almost in the negatives. And so I knew that adding 7 degrees wasn't gonna put me over 9 degrees of total caster. So that's why I went with the 7-degree kit, but it's important for you to get that alignment spec sheet done and to take a look at that. All right, number 10, the thing that you wanna check on here is if your tire was on your Bronco and you grabbed the top of it and you pulled it towards you and kind of rocked it back and forth, is there any movement? Now, we're not talking about a ton of movement, but you'll kind of feel this like clicking kind of back and forth. And I've taken my tire off to show you, there's this kind of movement in there when your wheel bearing adjusting nut isn't tightened down enough. Now, I actually made a video on this a while back when I was putting on my disc brake kit, so you can check that out. But basically, there are 2 wheel bearing adjusting nuts and a washer that goes in between them. So I still have one of the wheel bearing adjusting nuts in there, but basically the one that's in there, when you tighten that down, it takes away that play. But the thing that you want to be careful of is you still want your tire to be able to spin. So the Haynes manual recommends that you tighten this down to 50 foot-pounds of torque and then back it off about 90 degrees. Now, there's still a lot of mystery around that. And what I'm gonna do right now is I'm just gonna go ahead and tighten mine down and kind of show you what happens when you tighten it down. This right here is a Dana 44 spindle lock nut socket. So basically you slip that on top of the lock nut, and now I'm just gonna go ahead and spin it and then tighten it down, and you can see that it stops. And now all of that play is gone, but now it's very difficult to spin my wheel. So you want to strike a balance between having very little play in there, but your wheel will still spin freely. And then what you do, once you've got that all locked in, then you put on your washer, and then you put the lock nut back on top of that. And then you want to tighten this lock nut down between 80 to 100 foot-pounds of torque. And this is the important one here, that you get it good and tight, because you don't want this coming loose and your whole hub falling off, or your whole tire falling off for that matter. So this one, you really want to make sure that you get to 80 to 100 foot-pounds of torque. And that's why I talked about in the beginning, you want to make sure that you have a torque wrench while you're doing this stuff, because it's super important to get your torque specs right if you want your Bronco to drive right. So I'm going to go ahead and put these back on. I'm not going to show you all the steps on how to do it, but if there is any play in your tire, this is the step that you want to check. And remember, you have to actually jack your Bronco up off of the ground to check this most of the time. So get your Bronco up high and check that tire and see if there's any play. Again, one of the things that we talked about in the previous lesson were these U-bolts, and this can affect your steering if these U-bolts are loose. So make sure to get a torque wrench on there and tighten these down to 60 foot-pounds or up to 80 foot-pounds, but don't over tighten them. The last thing that you want to check with your steering are your tires. Now, there's a lot to talk about with the tires, so we'll actually cover this in the next lesson. But the thing to just keep in mind is that you want your tire to come in full contact with the road. So you don't want to overinflate your tires where they're beginning to round and just the center of the tire is touching the road. You want to have the proper inflation so that all of the tread on the tire is contacting the road. Your homework for today is to download that PDF and make sure to go through all of those areas. You want to check your steering system completely and make sure everything looks good. And take your Bronco for a drive and leave a comment below. What's it driving like now? Is it better? Has it gotten worse? Hopefully not, but leave a comment below and let us know what's going on. And for you guys who are seeing some of these comments, make sure to help each other out. Comment on some of these things, some of the issues that other people are seeing, and let's all together help each other get our Bronco running and driving better than it ever has.